this yesterday. And before we bring Brad Sham on, who I just absolutely love, known him forever, and as ever is, I'm only 29 years old and he's only 32 years old, so that's our ever right now. So I just want to, I don't want to go anywhere near what I just said because I don't want to get hammered by him because Brad is not shy about doing that to me. And he reminds me of Jimmy Johnson at times because Jimmy always said, worry when I'm not responding to you. Okay. And Cowboys got a lot of decisions to make here. They really do. And let's bring in the legendary Brad Sham, who has been the voice of the Dallas Cowboys for how many years now, Brad?
This will be 46 if I live to September.
46 years.
Yeah.
Holy, we get Merrill Reese on here all the time.
Yeah, Merrill and Merrill, I started, this will be Merrill's 48th year with the Eagles, and I started a year before him, but in the middle 90s, I left the Cowboys to do the Texas Rangers for 3 years, and so then I came back in 98. So I started a year before Merrill, but he has 2 years seniority on me because of my baseball adventure.
Let me ask you this then, Brad, just before we get into the Cowboys here, what's been the biggest difference and change in the NFL, in your opinion, over that time?
In 46 years?
Yeah. The thing that stuck out the most to you?
There's not just one, Danny. The rules are so much different that let me go with that since it's the first thing that came to my mind. We measure players statistically, and we especially tend to do that with offensive players. So we talk about a lot of the records that guys today are setting, and if Troy Aikman had played with the rules in the passing game that exist today, he would have had, 5,000 yards a year. I mean, he would have eclipsed everything anybody ever thought of. So when I look at the Cowboys record book, Prescott had a really good year last year. Romo had some really good years. And I look at the record book, and these guys are surpassing Aikman, but they're really not because it's apples and oranges. You cannot compare the raw numbers. It's a little bit like the recent kerfuffle over Caitlin Clark versus Pistol Pete Maravich. It's just not the same thing. So I would say the biggest change has been in the rules, way the game's played, certainly player safety. As you well know, those used to be just 2 words in the dictionary, and now they're a lot more serious about it. Now, there are a dozen other really significant changes, but I would say the rules that influence the way the game is played every week would be my first choice.
Who do you? And again, I want to expand on one question here before I move on. Who do you think is more revered with the Cowboy fans, or is this a generational question? Is it Staubach or is it Aikman?
It's generational. The people who were big fans of whatever age they were at the time that Staubach was playing, just stop the conversation right now. And Aikman, by the way, would tell you, oh, no, Rodgers number 1. But I would say that if you just looked at the statistics, Staubach versus Aikman's statistics, many of Aikman's statistics were much more impressive. But I asked Roger once about 10 years ago, what do you think you would have done if you could have played with 4 and 5 wide receivers? I mean, they played with a fullback, with a tight end. Sometimes they play with 3 wide receivers, sometimes. And so if you'd put Staubach with these rules, it would have been the same thing as with Aikman. So if you ask people who watch Roger, they would say him. A lot of the people who watched Aikman, the younger ones especially, they were 15 or 20 years later, and they never really saw Roger at his prime. And I would say today, if they were walking down parallel streets a block apart, they would be equally ganged up on by well-wishers and
I would say this: if
well,
Roger
it's probably a tie.
I would say if Roger played in today's NFL, he's Mahomes, because he does a lot of the things Mahomes does, in the ability of him getting out in the perimeter. He was great on the run, throwing the ball.
Drove Landry crazy.
He was just great. I mean, to me, he looks like Mahomes.
Yeah, he drove Landry crazy.
So do you think Mahomes would have driven Tom Landry crazy?
Oh, God, absolutely. Mahomes would have had to have played a different game to get into the league. Roger came into the league in the late 60s when he got done with his stint in the Navy. So, yeah, Mahomes would have had to do different things to get in. Then if he was lucky enough to have a coach who was inventive enough to let him do the things he could do, then he still might have done some of the things he does today. But he's also, look, he's one of the greatest I've ever seen. And he's great in a different way than Tom Brady was great. He's great in a different way than Peyton Manning was great. And both of those guys are great. All those guys are great in a different way that Dan Marino and Dan Fouts were great. And I think Marino and Fouts were kind of, I put them more in the Aikman category, although Fouts really was much more of a contemporary of Staubach's, I would say. But those are all guys who, if they had played with today's defenses, rules, offensive formations, the record books would be bloody.
I love that. I'm going to start here with Dak Prescott here, and you tell me, it just seems of all the quarterbacks that we just talked about, maybe Troy a little bit, that the one thing that I admire about Dak is that it's more of a hands-off approach that he has with Jerry. Or how about this? To put it in a better phrase, it's more of an arm's length relationship that they have with one another. It's not adversarial, Brad. I'm not trying to say that they have one of those, but there's more of like a business relationship between those two, because a lot of the players, Jerry likes those guys, like Michael Irvin. Michael Irvin is one of his guys. Tony Romo is one of his guys. I don't feel that Dak is in that group of one of his guys, even though I know he is because he loves all of his guys. But am I wrong with that impression?
Well, I don't know if you're wrong, especially from a distance. I think that none of those guys you mentioned had to represent the percentage of a salary cap that Dak does. So, I mean, I remember one year Michael Irvin, they'd won the couple Super Bowls already, and Michael held out. And obviously, you know, you're totally correct. Michael and Jerry just love each other. And but Michael held out and he wanted more, and Jerry was not pleased. And he finally got him to end the holdout by saying, "Michael, this is what the job pays. Take it or leave it." And so Michael took it and came in. But that didn't mean he wasn't one of Jerry's guys, but there wasn't a salary cap then. So I think one of the things that contributes to the impression that you're describing is you got to be really careful if you're an NFL owner, not just Jerry. If you're an NFL owner, you have to look at what your salary cap is this year, next year, the year after that. What contracts are you putting together that you're going to want to extend? And then is the player that you're talking about paying now in the $50 million a year range on average, is that player worth whatever worth means, that money? And so you have to decide that as an owner when you are looking at a guy who has put up the kind of year that Prescott put up last year. And really, for the most part, since he had one bad year. And when you look at, but they haven't gotten where they want to get at the end of the year. They've not had playoff success. So you now are the Joneses. You've got this salary cap, and it's a real thing. And so when the guy says to you, here's what I did. Remember those games? Look at these statistics. Here's what I did. And then you are looking at paying him $40 million a year, and you've got these other contracts waiting on you, and you've got to add more guys every year. That might make you stand back just a little bit publicly. I think privately they're fine. My impression is that Dak really handles it well. Dak understands that it's not personal, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't like it if he gets hardballed. And right now he's in a position, and a lot of quarterbacks are, to hardball right back. So that, I think, makes for a relationship with the owner that might not be quite as warm and fuzzy as some of the other ones that you're talking about.
The Eagles and we're based in Philly, as you know, Brad. And so let me throw this at you here. Kellen Moore is now the new offensive coordinator for the Eagles. And like you said, his time there in Dallas, was part of the development of Dak Prescott, and he was a major part of his development there. What should Eagle fans look at? Kind of maybe a lateral move or a lateral step backwards last year because of the inexperienced coordinator they had with Brian Johnson. What does Kellen Moore, in your opinion, you think offer and bring to the Eagles when it comes to the development of Jalen Hurts?
Oh, Kellen's really smart offensive. He's a smart guy, but he's practically an offensive football savant. Now he still has to have all the other pieces. It's fine to talk about taking Jalen Hurts to the next step in a vacuum, but they've got a center to replace, a Hall of Fame center. Now they think they've got the guy, and there's some good ones in the draft. I think that the things that Jason Kelce gave to the Eagles are so deep in intangibles that you're going to have to work around those in communication and the different kinds of things that you do. You have Saquon Barkley. That will be very good as long as he's healthy and everything else works. But, it's not just the quarterback in a vacuum. Kellen's a good offensive coach. He was a good offensive coach last year, and the Chargers didn't do much offensively. And I don't think that they had as high an opinion of him in Charger land, to the extent that there are any real fans of the Chargers in L.A. I don't think they had as high an opinion of him as the Cowboys did the first couple of years, certainly. But he's good. He understands quarterback play. When you talk about him being important in Dak's development, remember when they met, Dak was Kellen's backup. Kellen was the backup to Tony Romo.
Right.
When Dak came in as a rookie, and Kellen, I can see it right now. Tyron Smith destroyed DeMarcus Lawrence in a drill, and then the next guy came in, and Romo got hurt in camp, and he really. I'm mixing my guys up. Kellen got hurt. There was a drill. Kellen got hurt, broke his leg. Kellen was the backup quarterback. They were having debates. The big story in camp was, Nick Foles hadn't signed anywhere. There were all kinds of sign this guy, sign that guy. They said, we like who we got. Kellen broke his ankle. And suddenly Dak, who actually went into camp competing for the third job, he was the fourth guy when they started. Now he's number 2. And so they don't really have any idea what they've got. And he wasn't a great practice player, especially right away. Jason Garrett and Kellen and a couple others did a really good job of teaching him, and he's a very good study. So Kellen Moore did a tremendous amount with and for Dak that year because he was on injured reserve and he was his teammate and he helped teach him. And then Mark Sanchez was the backup, and he was tremendously influential on Dak on learning how to be a professional quarterback. So that's when Dak and Kellen got to know each other. They were teammates. And then Kellen became the quarterback coach, and then he became the offensive coordinator. So Kellen really understands Dak, and they had a long history together. He'll walk in with Hurts. He's seen him. He will know what things to do to put Jalen Hurts in the best possible position. And he's a good play deviser and he's a good play caller. But the extent to which things work depends on all the guys. Someone's trying to block you. And if you beat the center, then it doesn't matter how good the play was and all the rest of it. So that's the great thing about football. But Kellen's good. Kellen will put Jalen Hurts in the best position to succeed, and I think he'll help make him better.
The inactivity of the Cowboys is being thrown around now. Obviously, if you drop a soda can or a beer can outside of the Cowboy complex, that's major news too, and that'll be on the front headlines of CNN. I mean, so it doesn't, it's magnified. Cowboys doing nothing. I mean, Jerry really still today, in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, Brad, but the draft is the centerpiece for him on how he builds his foundation for his football team to this day. And he has always, and I've talked to Steven about this, I think they look at NFL free agency as Band-Aids, and they look at the draft pieces as cement blocks and cinder blocks. And so the Cowboys aren't really massive players ever when it comes to signing massive free agents. Do they still hold that philosophy, and that's why it's what it is today?
Yes, and they made a couple of trades many years ago. One was for Joey Galloway, one was for the wide receiver,
Amari Cooper.
Texas. No. Before, way before. Same name as the safety. I'm blanking. Different guys.
Damn, me too.
But they gave up like 2 number ones for each guy, and those both backfired on him. Roy Williams, the receiver, Roy Williams,
right?
And so those both backfired on him, and then they didn't have the draft capital, and so I think that those things changed the way they viewed veteran outside acquisition, but they've never really ever spent a lot of money. But you know what? There are a lot of people who I respect greatly who say, and I tend to agree, that the first week, not just day, but the first week of free agency is when the silly money is spent.
You're overpaying.
These things look great right now, but it's veteran guys. Guys get hurt, and you really impact your cap. Doesn't mean it's a bad deal, but there's more of them probably that don't. Those guys aren't going to play out those contracts, but appearances make it look like Washington had all this cap room, like second most in the league, I think.
Yep.
So they went out and got a bunch of really good players, and the Eagles got Barkley and a couple. They got the safety back who they let go to Detroit.
And Bryce Huff, the kid from the Jets.
And Huff makes them better, and although again, they lost Fletcher Cox, so there's all those moving parts. But the Eagles have done some things. The Giants have certainly done some things. Good trade with Carolina. I really think, though, the point you're making, Dan, is that what the Cowboys are doing is it clearly pales by comparison to the activity of everybody else in the division so far. We're 3 days in. New England, I think, built their dynasty in part by making really smart bargain decisions.
Economical moves.
Second and third week of free agency, they looked at a player, maybe it was Cilio. They looked at him and they said, you know what, he's not the biggest, he's not the fastest, but we know what he does well, and we see a role for him in our defense, so we will pay him a reasonable salary that is less than the first week's guys are getting, and then we can afford 2 or 3 other players like him at other positions. I thought they were geniuses at that. Having Brady helped, but they were geniuses at that, in my opinion, in building their team. And those are much less sexy, harder to do. I think the biggest moves the Cowboys made last year were the trades for Gilmore and Brandon Cooks. And that really impacted their team. But here's the other thing I think that is bringing the Cowboys into great ridicule right now. Jerry said, I think it was at the Senior Bowl. It was either the Senior Bowl or the Combine. He said
Senior Bowl.
He was still mad about the playoff game. He probably still is now, but he was still steaming. And he said, you're going to see us go all in on players that we might not have done before and in different ways than we would have done before. And it turns out that his version of all in, whatever he meant at the time, his version of all in is much different than almost everybody else who speaks the language. When I heard that, I thought, oh, this is going to be cool, because they realize that the window is somewhat short. You know, they're going to have to make a decision on the head coach at the end of the year. They're going to figure out ways to spend some money and get 2 or 3 guys who are guys they wouldn't have signed before. They're going to impact things, but that is not what they've done. Had he not ever said the words all in, then I don't think there would be quite the outcry. There would be an outcry because of what the other 3 teams in the division have done, but I don't think it would be as bad as the whole they dug themselves with that simple little phrase.
But Brad, I didn't take it because I know this guy. I didn't take it. He was spending money on players. I took it like this. We're all in on the current players we have right now, and these guys better show up this year. That includes Dak. That includes everybody on that team, because we've been all in on you, and you're going to have to show us this year for us to be able to pay you the money that you want. That's CD, that's Micah, that's Dak Prescott. That's how I took that. I didn't take it any other way, where they were going to just frugally throw money out at people like that and just throw casual cash at, though, because they don't do that.
He could have very well meant we're going to be all in by getting contracts done with Lamb and Parsons and Prescott. Now, meanwhile, I'm not smart enough at caponomics to know if they had already done a deal with Dak. I know they wanted to, and there are conversations going on that nobody's reporting. But had they done a deal with Dak like last week, how would that have impacted their cap? It would have given them, instead of being $2 million over the cap, they were over $2 million under. They were over the cap. So, and there were a few teams in that spot around. Look at what the Chargers had to do. Yeah. Release people.
Bills too.
Bills. Oh my gosh. It was a bloodbath there.
That's right.
That happens sometimes. And so he might have meant we're going to go all in. We're going to get these deals done with these guys who are our guys who we drafted and have developed. I don't know if they had gotten a deal done with Prescott last week, how it would have impacted the money they have to spend this year. It seems to me that it must have had the potential to have a great impact. I'm also reading, though, that a lot of people who understand how their contracts work many of them in the media are saying, if you think this is bad, wait till next year. Wait till you see what their cap issues are next year. And as you know, Dan, executives who are team building and doing contracts, they don't think about this stuff 1 year at a time. They think about what they've got going on 2, 3, and 4 years down the road, so they can try to have a team. It's fine to throw a lot of money at a guy, and it's great to throw a lot of money at 3 guys. But if you wind up then not having any money to spend on anybody, you could be setting yourself up for half a decade or more of really bad results, because you just can't pay the players that you want to have. So they're thinking about all that. I think that's one of the reasons that they haven't spent any more. But they didn't get a deal done with Dak. I still kind of in my bones, I think they will, just because it just seems to me that if they don't do a deal with him, and then he's $60 million, 59.4, whatever it is on their cap this year, and is in a walk year and can just go out the door, that sounds like bad business.
Yeah.
And you can say anything you want about the Joneses, but you cannot say that Jerry Jones is bad at business.
No.
So that's why I think they'll still figure out a way to get one done. But, you know, they haven't said what they're going to do with Michael Gallup. And I mean, I think the tea leaves would say that they might want to go in different directions. And they've given him permission to make a trade if the stories are true, to seek a trade. But so they've got 2 or 3 guys that they could, by doing new contracts and extensions, besides Zach Martin, who they redid his contract. They've got 2 or 3 guys who I think could impact their short-term cap. They haven't done that. They're trying to. And in the meantime, my advice to people is keep your powder dry. No one's playing any games yet. You know, we'll know what's today, the 14th of March. Yep. Yeah, I think we got 6 weeks to the draft. So a lot of these rosters will look different over the next month. More players will be signed and released, and there may be short-term deals, but the rosters will look different than they look today. And then you'll have the draft, and then they'll look different again. So I don't think, as much as fans love or hate what a team is doing and want to applaud or ridicule what a team has done in the first 2 days of free agency, I just don't think it's wise to make any long-term impressions that you want to form in cement based on those 2 days.
2 last questions for you here. Dak Prescott, let's go back to him for a second. You guys have won 36 ball games in the last 2 regular seasons. And I love the comment that Jerry made in the offseason when he said, you know, this guy keeps us around the rim. And when you're around the rim, you're still in the game and you have an opportunity. And even though the Cowboys in the last couple decades have struggled to get to an NFC championship game, is it more so that they're sold on Dak Prescott being a guy who keeps them around the rim with a shot? Or is it that Jerry's in a position now as the owner of the team where he's not going to bring in a rookie and they're not going to develop a guy for another 4 years or another guy and go down with Cooper Rush or somebody like the ilk of a Baker Mayfield? They're not going to go there. So that gives Dak the leverage, doesn't it, right now where he is with the Cowboys?
Well, I think what gives him the leverage is that his contract is up and he is almost inarguably, I would say, one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league. Maybe,
Brad, if Kirk Cousins gets that money in Atlanta like he is, I mean, where are we with Dak then with that, right?
I did a speaking engagement last week and Q&A, and you know how fans are, and someone said, you know, Dak, and I said, okay, go ahead and tell me the quarterbacks in the league that you would take today ahead of Dak Prescott. First guy says, Mahomes. I said, yes, Mahomes. Good. That's one. Who's the next one? Guy says, Josh Allen. I said, well, okay. Their numbers are remarkably similar, and Josh Allen hadn't won anything either, but everybody recognizes his talent. I'll give you Josh Allen. That's 2. Now, who are the rest of the quarterbacks you would take ahead of Dak Prescott? And there is no answer to that because there are not – everybody who is listening to us right now, somebody might say, heck, I'd take Matthew Stafford over him today. Okay. I don't think that would be a unanimous opinion, but if you want to say that, that's fine. But I don't think – some people would say Jalen Hurts. Some people would not say Jalen Hurts. I would say it would be almost unanimous that you could not name 6 quarterbacks in the league who you would inarguably take ahead of Dak Prescott. Now, that being the case, this is the guy you have, and he is still really at the peak of his career with an opportunity to get better. Peyton Manning hadn't won a Super Bowl by the time he was in the league as long as Dak has been. So now let's go back and see about their history with acquiring quarterbacks, okay? They didn't have to acquire Aikman. He'd been drafted for him by them being the worst team in the league in '88. Took a while to get from Aikman to Romo, who was an accident. He was an undrafted free agent. It's like Brady. Don't tell me how much you love the guy. Everybody said no thank you in the whole league.
That's right.
Including them for the whole draft. So that worked out, but don't tell me how much you love the guy. And then they went right into Prescott, who they drafted in the 4th round. So don't tell me how much you thought this was your guy because he went in the 4th round.
You missed him 3 times.
And by the way, he was their 2nd pick in the 4th round that year.
Wow.
So there was a defensive end from Oklahoma who is out of the league, long since out of the league now, who was drafted earlier than him in the 4th round. So don't tell me about these last 2 quarterbacks, how you knew where they were. They got lucky. And you have to get lucky sometimes. But the time between Aikman and Romo was a long time. And I don't know why you would sit there and say, well, we'll get a quarterback. How do you know you're going to get a quarterback? They're not there. They're like offensive tackles. Nobody's got them. So if you want to be bad enough to get into the top, 2 or 3 in the league and hope that year there's a guy who is a guarantee. And by the way, how many first-round quarterbacks have missed in the last 5 years? Just 5. I mean, nothing's for sure. Baker Mayfield is on his 4th team.
Yep.
I mean, and he's good. Baker Mayfield's a good quarterback. It's just not. Parcells used to say, you can't go down to the Texaco and dial up 1-800-quarterback. You have to have a plan, and I don't see a plan. And it's not like you're talking, this is my opinion, it's not like you're talking yourself into taking a bellboy from the Weston. You're talking about a really good player. Is he the best? Probably not. He's one of the best. And you've got him at his prime. Now you have to decide how much of your salary cap are you willing to devote to him. That's why the guys with the big bucks have the big bucks.
Finally, and this is going to put you on the spot a little bit here, Brad. You think Dak is better under Mike McCarthy than he was better under Kellen Moore?
This is a really interesting question because McCarthy was a full participant in keeping Kellen as the offensive coordinator.
Huh.
McCarthy, the first year, spent half his time reminding us that it was his idea to keep Kellen because of what Kellen and Dak had done together that we talked about earlier, and they spoke the same language, and he didn't want to upset that. He thought it was better for Dak's development to keep Kellen Moore. So the first year's a disaster because of COVID, and everything on that team was a disaster that year. And then they won 12 games 3 years in a row, and made the playoffs 3 years in a row, which were 2 things that had not been done with this franchise in 30 years.
Yeah.
So now, after 21 and 22, they weren't making the offensive progress that they wanted to make. And I think Mike always wanted to call the plays. I think he always wished that he had done that, but he thought that, I think he honestly believed it was best for Dak's development to have Kellen do it. Now he's kind of wondering, should we do something else, go back to what I'm comfortable with? Kellen got his opportunity to go to the Chargers. And so when you ask about Prescott and McCarthy, to me, they're tied at the hip. McCarthy likes, in my opinion, he likes nothing better than calling plays. That's his favorite thing, not being the head coach. He loves calling plays. He loves getting close to the quarterback, designing the offense, and calling plays. So he said many times last year, don't forget, we're in the first year of this system. And I thought, what do you mean you're in the first year of the system? Where have you been the last 3 years? Haven't you been the head coach? But in his mind, the offense is different. And for most of the year, it was a tremendous success. And they scored all kinds of points and were a really good offensive team for most of the year. Now, they came up with a goose egg at the end. McCarthy said to me that the afternoon of the Green Bay game, my biggest job is to get the quarterback into a rhythm. And I remember asking him, is that like week to week? You have to do that every week? He said, it's play to play. So if that's the case, then they both failed that day because he was never in a rhythm. That one of Dak's comments after the game was that he thought he was playing too fast. Now, I think one of the reasons that McCarthy is coaching out his contract is because of what the work they did together, the progress that Dak made as a quarterback. And I think that if you're management, you look at it and you want to say, okay, we think that there's more to be gotten out of the guy. This guy just got more out of him statistically than anybody else has since he's been here. So let's give this one more run. And that's why another reason I think they'll extend Dak. If you knew you weren't going to do that, then maybe the thing to do would be to make a head coaching change, which seems inevitable if they don't get where they want to go anyway. Whether that's fair to Mike or not, it seems to be the way the wind is blowing. So I think that the two of them, I hope I'm answering your question, Danny, that I believe the two of them are joined at the hip. And Dak has said nothing but glowing things about how the offense worked last year with McCarthy calling plays. He felt very, very comfortable, maybe even more than he ever has. So I think that they both have a big, big spotlight on them. I don't know if it's even possible to quantify which is the bigger one. But I think that this is a theory that the two of them together can get where they want to go that has not yet had the opportunity to play itself out. And that's what this season for them is all about. And if they don't do what they want to do this year, then you will see, I think, substantial earth-shattering changes.
I'll leave you with this. It was really great to see Jimmy finally get into the Ring of Honor. And from what I understand, talking to Coach, because I talk to him weekly, that there's conversation about, and I don't think I'm throwing something out that shouldn't be thrown out, but there's conversation between Jerry and Steven about direction, an opinion, not with Jimmy like going, you should do this. It's more of, hey, we're kind of here with these kind of options. And, that Jerry goes, hey, okay, we're going to go with Jimmy. That's not what he's doing. But Coach says that he's subtly kind of involved in some conversation. So I would think that's a pretty interesting sign that these guys have buried a lot of the ill will in the past. It's funny, when they're together, they're like brothers. When they're apart, you would swear that they were boxing enemies. It's like the craziest relationship I've ever seen in my life between two dudes that actually love one another. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, there were some hard feelings, and it meant a lot to Jimmy. It meant more to Jimmy, I think, than Jerry. Jimmy to be in the Ring of Honor. And so now he is. And now all of the fighting in the past really doesn't matter anymore.
Yep.
And I do think that you're right. What it's done is create an atmosphere where Jerry feels comfortable picking up the phone. Jimmy feels receptive about answering it. Hey, just run this by me. What do you think? And I don't think that means that he's in on their decision-making policy, but I do think that it means that Jerry feels very comfortable asking his opinion, and Jimmy feels pretty comfortable with taking the call and giving them an honest answer.
Absolutely. Brad, you've been awesome to me. I thank you so much.
You bet, pal.
I love the fact that we're able to do this and catch up and see what's going on with the Cowboys. Thank you so much, my friend.
Welcome, buddy. Take care of yourself.
You got it. The great Brad Sham, legendary voice of the Dallas Cowboys. We so love what he does. 48 years calling all those great games for that franchise. Absolutely spectacular. Please do me a favor, hit the like button. Keep it here, National Football Show.